Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the second in our Women in Sports Coaching series, hosted by Tyrrelstown Mulhuddart Community Sports Hub. You're all very welcome. Tonight, in conversation with Cliona Foley, we have Cliodhna O'Connor, All-Ireland winner, All-Star, and now coach. So she's gone through the full range in GAA circles and outside of that also. So a fascinating conversation awaits, and we hope you enjoy it. So I'll hand you straight over to Cliona Foley without any further delay.
Thanks so much, Gordon, and welcome everybody to the Fingal Sports Office in Tyrrelstown and Mulhuddart Community Sports Hub. I suppose coaching masterclass is how what we call these. Let me say at the start, this discussion tonight with Cliona O'Connor is multi-sport. We're not specifically talking about one sport, and I think that's what's so brilliant about this. And Cliona herself has such an experience that actually she's the ideal person to talk about this. Apart from her brilliance as a coach, it's just that she's working actually in a lot of sports, and she's going to tell us now. But first of all, for anybody who doesn't know, there's two Clionas on screen, which is a bit confusing, but she's the one who has played in the 4 All-Ireland finals, won part of, captained her county Dublin, part of that groundbreaking women's football team in Dublin that finally won that All-Ireland first one in 2010. But what's really interesting about Cliona is that apart from her brilliance as a player, a 2-time All-Star and everything else that she did, she went into coaching really, really quickly actually after her career. And she has had a stellar career so far in coaching, and she's only 37. So there's a tendency, I think, for us always, particularly in Ireland and these islands, to think that, you know, you have to be an elder statesperson to be a brilliant coach, and it takes years and years and years. But if you see her progress, you will see that if you're passionate about it, it's possible to actually get into coaching quite young and be very successful very quickly. So Cliona O'Connor, welcome first of all. And Cliona, will you tell us exactly what you're working at as a coach at the moment?
Hello, first of all. So what am I working on as a coach? So I give myself the title of athlete development coach. So I started in the strength and conditioning realm, and I, depending on the sport, do a little bit of skills and tactical stuff. If it's GAA, if it's a sport I'm not familiar with, I'm more focused on the physical preparation, the strength and conditioning. But I kind of do a bit of everything depending on what the context is. My current roles are, so I'm with the Dublin Senior Hurlers. This is my 3rd season with them. With Matty Kenny, I was involved with Matty Kenny before with the Coola Hurlers. So I moved with him to the Dublin team, and I'm also with the Irish Hockey Under-23s. That's the sort of development squad that I just started with them before Christmas. So that's an interesting one. Having never worked with hockey before, obviously done a lot of team sports. So that's a really interesting project and start for me. Also with my local GAA club, I've been working for my local GAA club for probably the last maybe 10 years in different contexts, but trying to, I suppose, take a long-term approach to all the people and all the players that come through the club, rather than a new manager starting every year and everyone starts from scratch. So there's some sort of center point as players develop. And then outside of that, just a range of individual athletes. So for everything from show jumpers to squash players to anyone really who wants to do a bit of training, I suppose.
Yeah, I know out in Portmarnock, I know a squash player called Orla Doherty that you work with, and you know, it totally different from all of your teamwork, which is really interesting, and it's something that might crop up tonight as well. How does somebody who does a degree in UCD in English and music and then does a postgrad in international communications in DCU, how on earth do you end up working essentially full-time as a coach, which is very, very rare in Ireland, where most coaches are amateur and most people looking in tonight are amateur? It's actually hard to get to that level to be able to make some kind of a living off coaching.
Yeah, you could say
make the jump.
You could say I'm just very indecisive, I suppose. I don't know. I never planned. You meet people now who always want to be a sports scientist or, you know, want to work in professional sport. I never planned it, to be honest. When I did my Leaving Cert, I wanted to be a vet, and I didn't get the points. I missed the points, and I didn't want to repeat because I'd had enough of school. So I did 2 subjects that I liked. I said, I like English and music, so I'm going to go to UCD and do those. I was interested in kind of arts and media, so that's what I was doing playing football at the same time, finished in DCU and was looking for a job. And I was actually at a championship launch, I think, in Croke Park. And I handed the CEO of ladies football a CV and said, listen, I'm just living down the road in Stoneybatter. I'm free. If there's any coaching or anything you want, if there's anything happening, give me a ring, and even for a day or two, because I'm looking for a job. So that started me. Before that, I'd been coaching as a volunteer in my local GA club. I coached in summer camps from the time I was 16. I've probably been coaching, but I never saw it as a career. Then I started working in Croke Park. Helen O'Rourke, the CEO, then asked me, I think I was covering maybe maternity leave or something small. It started at, all of a sudden I had a full-time job in Croke Park working in the games development section, more and more into coaching, then started getting into strength and conditioning, and it just slowly transitioned, I suppose. And I just realized I really like this. I really like what I'm doing. And I guess if you're not playing anymore after you retire, it's the next best thing. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I love the the pressure of performance and matches and big days, and I love that bit of tension. So it's like, well, if I'm not playing anymore, I may as well still enjoy it, or I still get a kick out of that. So it just
really interesting, because we know that not the same number of women go into coaching. We'll talk about that later. And I often think that when women retire from elite careers, which you did, very few of them, actually go into coaching. And so it's really interesting that you did it. I don't know, is it the mad goalie streak in you, or was it just that kind of, that love and that pressure? Is really interesting that you'd say that. But what I wondered as well is, so you went off, and I think you did some qualifications through one of the English universities, didn't you, as well?
Yeah.
And back in DCU now doing a PhD, is it?
Yeah, in elite performance in sport. Yes, so I just started that last year. So
the rest of us were trying to maul banana bread or whatever. You were back and making more use of your time in DCU. I can't believe it. Makes me feel bad. But what I wondered was, at the heart of it, do you need to have a qualification to start out coaching, or is there something you think that's more important than a lot of the qualifications? What, if you have a thought in your mind of thinking, I wonder, will I try it? And I'll tell you why I'm saying that question, because we've just lost two great coaches in this country. Jerry Kiernan has just passed away, and Eamon Ryan, the coach of the women's Cork ladies football team that won 10 All-Irelands in 11 years. Both of them, I don't think, had massive qualifications, but I think that they had something else that made them brilliant coaches.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to say. And we've got to a point now in coach education and coach development and best practice where I even see it in our local GA club. So now it's by law, by rule, you have to have your foundation course, your code of ethics, your guard of vetting. You have to have all of that stuff, which is necessary for where we are now. But I think when you do all those things, the basic things for good governance and all that, there's something else that we're missing. I think because we've put so much emphasis on those courses now, we forget the fact that you don't have to have played a sport to be an excellent coach. You absolutely don't. So put it this way, I am now working with a hockey team. I played hockey for maybe a year in secondary school. I'm still trying to learn the language. I'm asking, well, how do you hit, what's a flick? What's it? Remind me of this. So I'm trying to learn this sport on the job, but I can still be very effective in terms of how I support the players and communicate to the players. And I think what you need to be a really excellent coach, nearly, if we take a dribble in basketball or a solo in Gaelic football, that technical model of that skill is the easy bit for a coach to learn. The most important quality to have, I think, is being able to communicate with people and being able to observe a context and find the most appropriate solution. And what I mean by that is, coach will say to me, do you have a drill for this or a game for this? And I say, well, I can give you a drill that works on the kick pass, but that might work for this team over here, but it mightn't work for your team. So having the ability to I suppose, decision make, read people, all that, like coaching is a social activity. So that skill I think is the most important quality for people to have. You can learn the technical stuff.
Yeah.
And again, my work with any sort of sports clubs or in coach development, there's so many people in GAA clubs and so many women who have the qualities to make excellent coaches, but feel like, well, I don't know how to solo, so therefore I can't coach. And I'm like, that's inconsequential.
We can teach you that.
We can teach you that in a second, but there's that hurdle that I have to have played, or I have to have known. I have to know all this stuff.
It's so true. Like, it's funny, people ask me about, what's the most, often ask people if they ask me about, they have a son or a daughter wants to get into sports journalism, they say, what do they have to be good at? And, they expect you to say things like they have to have brilliant grammar and they have to be brilliant memories, all that stuff, they have to be able to, and I always say curiosity. You have to be curious. And for coaches, is it not that you actually, at the heart of it, have to like people?
Yeah, you do. And
like working with people.
You absolutely do, because and you have to enjoy the ups and downs of it, I suppose. So for me as a coach, I'm coaching 20 people, let's say. They're not all going to love everything that I do. They're not all going to do exactly what I say. A kind of a mentor of mine has this thing about the boyo, that every team needs a boyo, and the one, as a coach, they're so infuriating. They come up late, their laces are untied, but they're the one on the pitch that'll do that superb thing, and how does he do? And it nearly infuriates you that they have that flash of talent.
Yes.
But they don't fit into your box. You tell them to stand at the red cone, and they don't stand at the red cone, they stand the blue cone. So you have to kind of embrace and enjoy that bit of chaos and enjoy that bit of uncertainty, that you have to bring your ideas, and the players may or may not respond to them. And if they don't respond to them, it doesn't mean you're a terrible coach. It maybe just means you need to twist it a little bit. So
find another way. You have to find another way. Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I think coaching is about people. And, it was so interesting, like Eamon Ryan, if you listen to Cork players, or if you listen to people talking about Jerry Kieran this in the past week as well, it was his ability to be human and his ability to recognize the humanity of the people he worked with, and that when to pull back, when to go in hard, when to let them be alone, when to respect them, and always respect them as people. And I think, there's a big discussion on Off the Ball this week, got really interesting, and Pat Daly was on it from Croke Park, really interesting about the fun going out of sport, because we're treating people almost, we've so much science in our heads now with coaching, so much science and so much technology as well, and big teams, backroom teams, when really, if we can make it fun, particularly we know with dropout rates, which are increasing in boys on top of teenage girls, treating them like people that you like, and learning about them, knowing them as individuals, even in team context, it's really important, isn't it?
Hugely important. And in the last year as a coach has been incredibly challenging, but I've learned a lot about myself as a coach and players. So if you take it, you're coaching a team, club, county, whatever team it is, and we're people who've chosen team sports. So I'm at my best as a coach when I'm out in the pitch with mucky boots on and my whistle, and I'm ready to go. And I'm dealing with team sport athletes who love the team sport environment. All of a sudden, we're in COVID, where we can't train together. Everyone's trying to keep training remotely to keep themselves fit. I'm trying to communicate with athletes over Zoom and text and phone calls. We don't get to see each other. They're trying to do this running without their group around them.
Yes.
Some of them really strive or really thrive in it because they have that mentality. Others fall apart because they don't have the team environment, because they chose team sports, because they like the group. So it's just been, and as a coach, you have a choice. The person who's really struggling being out of the group, I can berate them and say, you're lazy and why aren't you doing what you're doing? Or you can understand, Jesus, she's really finding this difficult, and how am I going to make it easy? Because she's not someone who's well suited to training on her own, and it just, I can take it personally. Well, I've put together this running plan and you're not doing it. You're disrespecting me, and I'm the coach, and you obviously don't care. But that's not it at all, and it's just human nature. And I think as coaches, sometimes And I see this at club level as well. Everybody wants to do it really well at the minute. There's so much talk about retention and dropout and doing right by kids that you're coaching, that I think everyone feels under pressure. Oh my God, am I a good coach? Because the whole community is on the sideline watching me. And you know, if the session doesn't feel like it's going well, or we're losing the matches, then what are they going to think about me? And I think that being a coach on the side of a GAA pitch or soccer pitch or whatever, or basketball court now at community level, is one of the hardest places to be, because everybody has an opinion and more knowledge, and there's all the talk about what we should be doing for our kids in sport. And it's good conversations to have, but I think we need to just respect the humanity of the coaches as well, because most 99.9% of the people that I meet are really trying to do a good job. Maybe sometimes they get it wrong, but who doesn't get it wrong?
Yeah. And as you said, they're volunteers, and I think it does behove us as an audience, and also us as coaches, to understand as well, in the time of COVID, when we're worried about not just like at club level, in all sports. I think, you know, it doesn't matter whether it's an individual sport, whether it's badminton or tennis or whatever. People are worried because they're thinking, people are out of sport for so long now, will they come back? Particularly teenagers, and maybe particularly teenage girls, because the dropout rate is higher. So people may have to adjust. Coaches may have to adjust their expectations. But bottom line is, if you care about them as people, I think it always comes true. You know, and also if you keep fun and enjoyment at the heart of what you do, that will help. I mean, something you do is you phrased yourself as athletic development, but that kind of indicates that you specialize in fitness or kind of strength and conditioning. But you don't, or you have a philosophy about doing that, but in a way that also brings through skill.
Yeah, I suppose my thought process is, so if you're dealing with a volleyball player or basketball player or whatever the sport is, my job from a athlete development or let's call it strength and conditioning point of view is to make them better able to play their sport. So I have to look at the sport that they play and say, what are the demands of that sport? And then, do they have the physical capacities to deliver that or execute it? Now, when very few athletes in Ireland are professional, you know, and even some of our best athletes are semi-professional, whatever. So you don't get an unlimited contact time with them. So you've got to make the most of every bit that you have. So I kind of feel like as coaches, we are like the guardians of time of these people. They give us these hours every week, and we get to decide how they spend it. So my philosophy is, especially when I'm in a pitch environment or court or whatever, is how close can I keep it to the game? Rather than, so an example of that would be if I want to work on a soccer team's fitness. So instead of getting them to run from the blue cone to the red cone up and down the pitch, because they need to get this type of running in, I'd be saying to the soccer coaches or the skills coaches, can you design a game or a drill that gets this type of running? So they're still playing their sport, but I know, okay, well, that will take my physical requirement.
Yeah.
Because again, using your time wisely, and also they're there to play the sport. They're not there to be a runner. So the more, and you're talking about fun and engagement.
This is about the enjoyment element of it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So they're there to play football. So can we keep the football in their hands or at their feet as much as possible? So from that perspective, I always ask myself, how far away from the game do I have to go to get whatever physical thing I need? And then I suppose in a gym environment and from a skills point of view, you're always looking for that, what we call transference. So I can have someone in a gym and they're lifting X weight and they're getting strong and they're getting powerful and all that sort of stuff. But how does that, so they're learning how to do that in a gym environment with dumbbells or a barbell. How does that transfer onto the pitch or the court? And that is the bridge, I think, sometimes that we miss, especially with developing athletes. We think, oh, you've got to do all this work in the gym, but how do we make sure they can express that in their
and
sport.
and at the height of possibly in a competition with other bodies coming at them, somebody trying to dispossess them or whatever it is. In some sports, obviously they're going to be on their own side of the net or whatever it is, but in other sports there's physically somebody coming at you. I heard you talk about a very interesting thing, and I'm guessing that this has kind of influenced a lot of your thinking, and it seems to me to be a really good piece of advice for coaches even at underage level, and that is this thing called the Frina principle, which anybody who knows Liam Morgan, who's kind of the godfather of Irish coaching, as we call him. And by the way, Cliona isn't just a coach herself, but she has worked and helped to design coaching programs for ladies football, for example. She's worked with Coaching Ireland. So what is the Frina principle? And just because it's so brilliant in its simplicity, I think that it would help people even just at any level of coaching.
I think it's just a real good nugget. So Frina, find it, repeat it, improve it, nail it, adapt it. Okay, so if you're trying to teach somebody a new skill or a new tactic or whatever, think about approaching it this way. So finding it, well, what exactly is it that we're trying to do? So as coaches, do we just throw out a load of verbals at players and say we could do that, and it's a little bit complicated and nobody knows? Well, like, what are you talking about, coach? What exactly are you talking about? So is there clarity around what it is? Find it once. Can they do that? Then can they repeat it without any changes? Can they repeat it 10 times? Can they repeat it time after time? Then can you improve it? So improve it. Can you do it a little faster? Can you do it with no fumbles? Can you do it in a time period or whatever it is? So is there some measure of improvement? Then can you nail it? Are you confident that, well, I can ask this group of players to do this in any context and I know they can nail it? And then you adapt it. Then the change comes. But I know for me, and as a coach, and I've seen loads of other coaches do the same things, that we find it, we repeat it once, and then we adapt it. And then we move on.
Yeah. Or we expect them to adapt it. Yeah.
Exactly. Because well,
I taught you once, why wouldn't you know it? And you guys train and you're at intercounty level or whatever it is, men or women or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
You should be able to pick this up.
Exactly. And I have it on my session planner that we need to adapt it, and therefore we're going to follow that. Even though it's not quite right, we're going to move on, because I need to keep my session exciting and I need to make sure we're moving forward. But there's a confidence as a coach in being patient and saying, no, we're going to improve this. And that's where really good coaching comes in, and the players buy in. They say, and I often do this with them, with like a pattern of play, I call it. So if you imagine a GAA pitch and you take your cornerback and you have a pattern that the cornerback kicks to the wing back, who then kicks to the wing forward, who takes a shot. So it works up the pitch in a pattern. And you do it the first time and there's fumbles and there's balls going left and right and whatever. So there's a skill in being able to repeat that over and over again. And then I guarantee you, if you ask them to do it, okay, can you do that 10 times in a row with no fumble? They won't achieve it first time, guaranteed. And it's always a really positive conversation, because then you say to your players, be it intercounty or under 16, whatever, listen, we're doing this with no opposition. There's nobody here on the pitch. There's nobody trying to stop you. We're just passing from one to the other in a pattern that looks like the game. And it kind of forces players to take pride and put attention in their skills.
Yeah.
Because often people kind of rush the skills. So giving people time to practice them in that sort of mindset is really important. But not the key thing is not jumping to the adaptation before you've really allowed them time to hone the skill.
And then nail the movement and the patterns and then take it from there. It's really interesting. I heard Mary O'Connor talking this week on a women's sports discussion, and she was saying she thinks that with women and girls, very often they're not given enough time to learn the skills and do this kind of stuff and nail the skills, and because they don't have the confidence, then that's why you find a drop-off rate as well with girls in sport, because they're not given the building blocks properly, or they haven't traditionally over history, because the history of women's sport, even in this country, is still very short. Ladies Gaelic football only started, competitively as an organization in 1973. So she's saying that area hasn't been. And I wondered, do you adjust how you coach for gender and also for age?
Definitely just how I coach for age, for sure. Without a doubt. I mean, it's something I say to people who coach younger teams, who may have played before or watch adult teams training, and I say, if your under 12 session looks like the senior men's session, there's something wrong.
Serious problem.
It should look different, you know. So definitely adjust for age. In terms of adjusting for gender, it's more adjusting for the group, I think. And I think some people, if you go into a male dressing room versus a female dressing room and you presume that you have to do it differently, I think sometimes then you might make presumptions that aren't necessarily true. But if you enter any dressing room thinking, well, I've got to suss out this group first before I decide what's the most appropriate way to coach them, then you're more likely to get it right in any context. I think some of the main differences that I have found, to generalize here now.
You're allowed to generalize.
Yeah.
You've enough experience to generalize.
Between males and females, like the discourse, the tone of the dressing rooms are different. I think in male dressing rooms there can be there's testosterone, there's a lot of oomph, and they kind of push this physicality and the macho-ness and the combat of sport. And there's problems with that too, in terms of pushing masculinity, and then that's how you become a good sportsman. So talk to some men about that and they'll have issues with that too. But that's generally the tone of it. It's very combative. And I've seen coaches struggle in female dressing rooms when they use that same combative type of discourse, and it's send her into next week, and it's very aggressive. And when that doesn't work and doesn't elicit the response that they think it should in the female dressing room, sometimes it can turn into, what's wrong with this group? They just don't care enough. They're not willing to put their bodies on the line. Why aren't they competitive? And I'm saying, well, they're outrageously competitive, but they just don't respond to that language.
Yeah.
But and that is sometimes the problem, that there's a thought, or sometimes this misconception that we can't push girls, they're not as aggressive, or they're not as competitive, or whatever, but they absolutely are.
They are, yeah. But to tap into it can be slightly different. There can be a more collaborative thing going on there. I think definitely that's really interesting that you should say it with your experience as a player and a coach.
Yeah, if you take a good example that we might know, like Sinead Goldrick, right? So I played with Sinead Goldrick. She's now gone to play Aussie rules. Sinead is a player that plays on the edge in her football.
Right. She would go through you for a shortcut, as we say.
Yeah, like lovely girl, big long ponytail, all of that, but is unbelievably competitive and unbelievably focused on getting, and will throw herself at anything. Now, so she has that innately in her. However, how you elicit that or kind of light that fire in Sinead might be very different to how you do it to a bloke in the dressing room down the road, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And I think that is the mistake that we make with females sometimes.
Interesting. And actually, like, we've some really good questions in already, and somebody said one question that we've got was about, I think it's Yana Langford from tennis asked, like, how do you have any tips for building that sort of camaraderie and team spirit? Because I think that's what Sinead Goldrick and that women's Dublin team at the moment, that's what they embody for me. They're fiercely competitive, but they're incredibly cohesive and unified as a group, and because of that they're successful. And Jana's asking, like, have you any tips for trying to get that sort of camaraderie into a group, into a team sport, or is it just knowing each of them so well?
I think a key thing is this idea of a common purpose or a shared understanding, and that sort of seems wishy-washy. So what do I mean by that? Like, if we're talking about females, I find that sometimes we ask them to communicate, to call each other out, to push each other, to raise the standard of the group. And I think sometimes those groups, female groups, can struggle to learn how to do that, because think about secondary schools and how we, like, boys will meet each other and say, I don't like you, you're a whatever, and have a little row, and they'll meet eye to eye. Girls often don't do that. They kind of, well, she said this and it's a bit behind the door, and we'll talk about it as we're walking home from school. So
it's that pressure to be nice, or that imposition to be nice. Sometimes I think that kind of gets in women's way and girls' ways. Sometimes it's a cultural thing. It's an unusual thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in a sport dressing room, if you say we want to be honest with each other, and we need to push the standard, so if someone isn't doing it, then we need to be able to have that conversation. Well, that's not as easy for a group of 30 girls to do. And I think you have to show them and teach them that that's okay. That if you say, do you know what, this isn't good enough, or you didn't go around that cone and we said we were going to go around the cone, and there's going to be no repercussions to that. So I can say that at training, and then we all go home, and those 5 girls aren't going to talk about me behind my back.
Yeah. And very interesting if we can engender that in young girls, younger, when we're coaching them, younger, even, to take that ownership and not to be afraid to speak out, and for nobody to be judging anybody else. That's a really interesting point, actually. Yeah. Somebody else, go on.
And just not to be afraid of, how can we give the group permission to be really ambitious and want to be really good at this? And how do you do that in a way that isn't picking holes in other people?
Yeah, exactly. Take that judgment out of it, of course. Michael Kingston had a question as well, and he was saying, what's the best piece of coaching advice anybody ever gave you?
That's a really difficult question.
Good question. It's a great question, Michael.
The best piece of coaching advice. Well, I kind of mentioned it before, and I might come up with another one, might strike me before we finish, but definitely that thing around the boyo. The
one that's difficult to coach might be you've to find a way to connect with them, because they may be your strength.
Yeah, and also they're not
I love it.
They're not disrespecting you either.
Yes.
They just mightn't fit into your structured needs session. So just because your session doesn't go exactly to plan, or they don't do exactly what you want, doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your session, nor does it mean that they don't kind of respect you as a coach. We've got to have a bit of flexibility, a bit of fluidity in this.
And that's about knowing them and knowing what makes them tick, and trying to find something to connect with them. And by boyo, I'm presuming we probably all know this listening, but you mean you can have a boyo on a girls' team as well. It's that one person who will push you and test you, and maybe won't keep the rules, but at the same time you don't want to lose them. And when the chips are down, they may be the ones who will always lead you on the field, because they have that individual kind of drive in them, and that bit of uniqueness. It's really interesting, actually. It's a great way to put it, Cliona. I've never heard anybody describe it. Who said that one to you?
That was Liam Morgan.
Was it? Liam Morgan, if anybody knows or ever gets a chance to do any work, well, he's retired, but he's still working away. But he was coaching Ireland for years. He is a genius, and I mean, you listen to him forever talking about coaching. He's brilliant. I'm interested in early specialization, because there's a big thing now at the moment. You've got to be centering on one sport when they're about 14 or 15, and they can't be playing a load of sport. Your experience, I heard Sunita is the opposite. Sunita Pushpur, the brilliant Irish rower who, is one of our great chances in Tokyo Olympics. I heard her this week just saying when she was younger, she played everything from basketball, soccer, skiing, swimming. She only came to rowing at about 17. Now she's the world champion. She left rowing, she went back to it. But I mean, she clearly picked up loads of other skills from other sports. So what's your feeling on early specialization?
Well, I suppose I have personal experience of my journey in sport, and I have scientific, best practice or knowledge that's out there. So I come at it from 2 angles. So for me, I was really lucky. I'm from Portmarnock, so our primary school, St. Helens, and secondary school, Portmarnock Community School, they were unbelievably good for sport. So, and it is, I think it's where I am today because of my attitude towards sport, that it wasn't a case of, do you want to sign up for basketball, or it was like, listen, girls, we're playing basketball tomorrow at 11 or after school. see you there, bring your lunch. So there was a cohort of my friends. It was probably about 20 of us between my year and the year below and above, who just played everything. Now, within that group, you had some people who went on to play volleyball for Ireland. We had soccer players for Ireland, Dublin camogie, Dublin football, loads of different sports. But more important than that achievement was the fact that someone could say to me, here, do you want to play, I don't know, 5-a-side soccer tomorrow? I'm a rubbish soccer player, absolutely rubbish. But that exposure has given me the confidence to say, yeah, I'll give it a go. And I don't really care if I'm good or bad at it. I'll just play because I like playing.
At the heart of that, it sounds to me like somebody who was working with you in the schools, or several people, taught you that this was fun. It wasn't about winning. It was fun. And that's what made you go and do it. Not because you thought we have to win this, and I mightn't be good enough. It was, we're going to have great fun to do this. And we know with a lot of studies that we've seen, this is a factor keeping young girls in sport. They have to enjoy it. A certain percentage of them will be really competitive, but it's a smaller percentage than in boys, it appears. Enjoyment and fun is the key to keeping girls in sport and through those dangerous years where they drop out between sort of 13, 17. So you must have had that with you. You must have loved it. You must have had fun all the time.
We absolutely did. But it gave you, you hear girls now, and I talk to them about, do you play sport, whatever. And often you get this answer of, I'm not sporty. And there's a self-selection or self-identification happening that I'm either sporty or I'm not. Because I'm not serious about my GA. Oh, well, those girls, they want to go and play for Meath under 16 or whatever. So they're serious, and I'm not serious. So therefore I'm not sporty. So we have to get out of that identification of sporty and not. I mean, your sport could be bloody hula hooping, it could be anything, but it's just that feeling of activity. And then from a talent development point of view, the more skills you get in that going through puberty in that development age group, the more well-rounded athlete you're going to be. And if you come to the end of your teenage years as a really well-rounded athlete, being exposed to stuff with hand-eye coordination, being exposed to stuff that has a bit of endurance, that has change of direction, then kind of the world's your oyster in terms of being able to specialize.
And we know women's sport, we had statistics there last one as well. I mean, we could trot them out here, but I mean, roughly 10% of top level coaches are female, and it varies so much across different sports at amateur level. But we know that, female coaches are in the minority. So it appears to be a factor as well in girls staying in sport, that some of them like to be coached by women, not all. So have you any tips for us as to get more women in our clubs or in our organizations into coaching?
I think the important thing is, so I was given a course about coaching teenagers a while ago, and a lot of the people in the room were, so you had a selection of men who were doing a lot of the coaching, and then you had sorry, there's a dog scratching at the door here. Then you have the, let's call it the supporting women. So now many female teams, they have the female liaison officer, so there has to be a woman involved. Okay. But often that person is somebody's mammy who said, listen, we need an FLO, will you come on board here? So I challenge that room by saying, if we're talking about coaching revolving around communication and keeping teenage girls involved, you might know football really well, but that woman over there knows teenage girls really well.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that we're missing. We're missing that psychosocial bit. If we're talking about creating the right environment for teenage girls, we're maybe getting more females involved, and they might understand that environment a bit more and understand that group a bit more. Because I find coaching teenage girls challenging, like really challenging. It's not particularly easy. And the same with teenage. I could actually coaching any teenager.
Yeah. Teenagers are very difficult. Yeah, really, they're very challenging.
Really, really difficult. So it's not bloody easy. And we also forget that at times. It's like, I talk to school teachers. teenagers can be horrific. So we have to try and connect with that group as best as possible. So if you're coaching in a club, or if you're trying to get more coaches involved in a club, I think remind people of that fact, first of all. There's so
that they're brilliant, that they're great with kids.
Yeah,
that's the starting point.
Exactly.
You can teach them the skills, but if they have that innate thing where they connect with kids, that's a brilliant start.
And make it easy for them, because I suppose, think about it as well. A new person comes, so I'm the head coach for whatever, the under 16s, a new person comes along. So often what happens is it either goes to either end of the spectrum. The new person either, well, I'll just set out a few cones and I'll carry the water bottles, and it never really goes beyond that, because I'm the head coach and I like to be in control. And I've all the plans here, and I'm going to do it because this team has to do this right, and I want to make sure it's right. And so that happens. So my ego is getting in the way of developing this coach, because, well, I won't throw her in there, she mightn't get it right, and then whatever. Or the other thing happens, okay, you're new today, off you go.
Throw them in the deep end.
And they're standing there going, I haven't a bloody clue what to do. And then they're put off because they're so how do we make those steps easier? How do we
mentoring system? It has to be a mentoring system within the club.
And it has to be,
or the organization.
Often it's the current coach is the blocker. And I have 100% been guilty of that. Oh yeah, come and support my team, and will you be part of this coaching team? But I want to do the coaching.
Yeah.
You know, but so at some point you have to say, okay, how am I going to make it easy? What about if I gave them here are 4 drills, and for the next 4 to 6 weeks, just do those. Take those each week. So you're not trying to come up with new stuff. This is stuff the team already knows, and you coach it, and let them. And so part of your job as a coach is not just coaching your team; it's developing this person as well. You know.
And I heard somebody else say at a coaching session, a Zoom session earlier this week as well. They were saying even with their under 16 girls, they have this theory of each one teach one. So they get them to work with each other and just develop them, help them to develop their coaching skills, and to find out, is it something that they like? And because if you do it with them and give them a little bit of confidence and skills and show them how to do it, you will find coaches. But we know, even through all the theory of business and everything, women need mentoring. They have less confidence than men, and they need help. And so you just need to bring them in under the thing with you. Those are all great. Somebody asked me an interesting question: how do you deal with leaving your beloved club and going to uni and potentially joining a new club, or decreased dedication? I think a lot of sporting organizations are starting to look into universities and try to give people in universities a more rounded and competitive experience of sport. You know, universities were great for athletics and things for a long time, or, you know, they've been good for men's rugby, but they weren't necessarily good for other forms of sport, I think.
Yeah, I think college sport and university sport is getting, as you said, more well-rounded and more competitive, and but it's also, maybe that's an emotional thing. Maybe sometimes you're very tied to your local club and you can love it, and it's where you grew up, and I see a lot of people who move to Dublin and really struggle not with sort of cutting the cord with their club, because it's not.
Yes, that's exactly what Saoirse is asking this question. I think that's exactly what she's saying.
Yeah. And that can be really, really difficult. And I suppose it's how you see sport in your life is my sport and my identity as a sports person tied up with my local club, or do I feel like, well, I'm a sports person generally, so I'll play wherever I am, you know? So it can be
that the tribe is way wider, and you'll find your place in another tribe, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah.
The one of the things I was wondering about, it's the AFLW is starting tomorrow, and I wondered if you'd got a chance, would you have loved a chance to go and play professionally in Australia, and what do you think Irish players can get from going abroad in any sport?
Well, sure, it's a great experience, isn't it? There's been a lot of talk in ladies football about all these players going abroad, and when you look at it, it's what is it? They're 16 or 17 now. Over in Australia, and out of the massive amount of people who are playing ladies football in Ireland, I don't think it's a massive threat to our game, to be honest. It's a very, very small portion. But it sure isn't it, if you're a competitive sports person, isn't it a dream to go to
Yeah.
another country, to play in a warm climate, in a new game? It's such a fabulous experience for anyone who gets the chance. Of course you'd love to. Yeah, it's brilliant. Now the old tackle over there is fairly rough enough, but
Yeah.
me as a goalkeeper, I was well protected in my little square. I could
Exactly.
throw a knee up and give it. I didn't really have to take it. But
We have
sure,
a great
great.
we have a great question in here. Sorry to interrupt you, from Chanel O'Connor. No relation, I'm presuming, and because she's GA related. But it is a great question, and I'm presuming she means as a coach, not as a player. She says, "How does she train in bad weather?" And I often think this is a real challenge for coaches: is how do you get people to go out in bad weather? You know, and in Ireland we get a lot of it, and it does affect some people's involvement in sport. I think in the winter we get a lot of drop off.
Most definitely. And well, that's where that fun thing comes in, isn't it? Or knowing your context. So I could have a fabulous session written on my piece of paper and go up to the pitch, and 20 minutes in, it starts to bucket rain. And whatever I've planned isn't really going to work in this scenario. Everybody's a bit miserable. What I planned was a really technical session about a high catch, and sure, the balls are going all over the place. So it's about reading the situation and saying, okay, well, this is miserable. They're miserable. I'm freezing. So let's put that session in the back pocket and see, how can we make this in any way fun? Can we have a bit of crack? Is there any sort of races we can do? Whatever, whoever is there. Because trying to stick rigidly to the plan that you've had, if it's falling apart left, right and center, then throw it away, and anything that makes it enjoyable, anything at all,
That's such a great response, because it's so interesting. It is a great question, and I know I'm only thinking of them today because we were talking about it before we started. Sean Boylan, who coached the famous Meath football team, the year that they made the breakthrough, he had them swimming in with buoys on them. He put them into a swimming pool and made them run with weights on them. They thought he was nuts. He had them out in rowing boats at one point, because he knew he had to freshen it up, because he knew there were guys physically on the team that just couldn't do the heavy training. It's about being creative, and about, again, it comes back to that thing of knowing who you're dealing with. I mean, somebody asked a question earlier on as well, which was like, how do you vary training? I think Saoirse might ask this one as well. How do you vary training? When you can't deal with the whole team like one amorphous group, so you're asking them all to do the same. But what if somebody's injured, or somebody's way older than the rest of the team, or whatever? Do you make allowances? Do you adjust?
Definitely. There's I don't know where this saying has come from, but it's I'll treat everybody fairly, but that doesn't mean we'll treat you all the same. So you have to take everybody for the context they're coming from. Again, I'm thinking of a club team I'm coaching. There's a guy who's been out of football for a couple of years. Rewind 4 or 5 years, excellent player. Now was away, coming back, and he's trying to get himself fit and ready for training, basically. Now there is no way in hell he can do the same thing as everybody else right now. And I could take the approach of, you're being lazy, come on, let's go, you've got to do what everyone else is doing. But he'll get injured, and it's not what he needs right now. So if you can kind of prove to your team that I may get people to do different things at different times, depends on what they need, and you have to trust me that it's because I want 30 fit and healthy people ready to go when the game starts. So again, if there's that trust in the group, and that sense of we're all in this together and we know why we're doing it, and a bit of common sense, I think is really important. And just back to something about you were saying about the weather there, and we were talking about that. I think in some ways, Cliona, we've got way too serious about coaching. And this is from someone who works, it's my profession.
Full time in it, yeah.
Like, it's sport at the end of the day, and we do it because we love it, and it's competitive, and of course you want to win. Of course everybody wants to win, otherwise you wouldn't play it. So that's a given, that we're competitive. But and even at club level, because it's so serious, and we're talking about the retention, and it all is very serious, and we should be trying to do the right thing. But that doesn't mean that if you're coaching from 6 to 7 on a Tuesday night that you have to coach from minute 1 to minute 60 and everything has to be perfect and everything. And oh my God, there's so much pressure on me. I think we need to lighten the tone a little bit, especially
And that's where I'm coming back to putting the fun back in, you know,
especially at
and
community level, you know.
at community level, yeah, and even at the high level. I don't know whether I said this the last workshop we had, but I always remember Liam Griffin, who led the Wexford hurlers, you know, to a brilliant breakthrough All Ireland again, and he's a fascinating man to talk to about coaching, and he went back to coaching his club minors the next year after doing that. But he said if he has an underage team, it doesn't matter what they're doing, he makes sure that every single one of those kids scores a goal before they go home that night.
Yeah.
And that could be about just at the end of it saying, right, we'll all have one shot, you know. And you even see things like goalpost challenges. You even see really highly, you know, skillful, serious teams winning at all kinds of international level, but they love nothing more than to have a go at a goalpost challenge or something like that,
Yeah.
and finish a session like that with a good giggle and a good laugh.
Yeah, yeah. It is important. Another little coaching nugget, I suppose. Again from Liam Moggan, now that I think of it. He had this thing called flow in your session. So what you do first, what you do last, and an ups moment and a wow moment. So how do you start your session? You know, start it with a bang, you know, get their attention, do something fun, do something a little bit different, not the same, oh, we're doing the same old warm-up we've done for 2 years. So what do you do first to capture the imagination of the group? What do you do last? What is the last thing that they remember when they're walking off back to their cars? And then in the middle, that idea of stretching them enough where it's, oh, oops, I didn't quite get that right. And so they're just on the edge of, I've made a little mistake. And then also a wow moment where they go, oh my God, we did it, or I did it. Wow.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That?
Fantastic. FLOW. What a brilliant way to remember it. So give it to us again.
So if when you think about your session, your flow, what you did first, what you did last, and then in the middle of the session, an oops and a wow moment. And
challenge them and delight them.
Yeah.
Brilliant. What a brilliant way to sum it up, because I think that's probably at the heart of great coaching. Whoever comes out of a session that has all of those things in it is going to have had a great time. And learned and be challenged and improve and adapt, all the things that you were talking about earlier as well. I think that has just been amazing. We're open to any more questions. Does anybody want to come in with any question? You can unmute yourselves if you want. We're happy to take any more that come our way. While we're waiting, one I often thought about, because you have such S&C specialism as well, weight training for teenagers. You know, I'm an ex-PE teacher, and we were always told, oh, not before 16, and that's 40 years ago. You know, their bones will still be forming, epiphyseal plates and all that. It seems to have changed. And is there, what is the science on it now, just briefly?
Well, yes and no, it has changed. I suppose you could put an age on it, but it's more about their maturation status. So you can have a 16-year-old who's gone through puberty and a 16-year-old who hasn't. So I suppose it's really, you wouldn't load anyone, as in have them heavy weights, until they've finished puberty. So generally speaking, they say at 16, 17, that's when people would start using resistance. However, there's a thing about, there's a concept, I think, with strength and conditioning means weights, but strength and conditioning also means body weight and core and push-ups. And so regardless of what your age is, before you put a bar on your back and try and squat, can you do it with nothing? Can you do it holding a medicine ball? Can you do it holding a football? So if I get a 22-year-old into the gym, I will have them squatting with a medicine ball first. Okay, you can do that. Then a light dumbbell. And then when you can do it with a 20 kg dumbbell, then you put the 20 kg bar on your back and go from there. So it's the exact same process with kids, I suppose, or teenagers. That
and I think it's something that parents as well will be interested in, because I do seem to see an awful lot of people lifting weights underage now, and I'm a bit shocked by it, but it's a very good point. It's as a coach as well, it's about their physical maturation. And again, it comes back to knowing your individuals in your team. If it's a team sport, or that is probably easier, I think, in individual coaching one-to-one, but it's harder when it's a team. But you still need to know them very well.
You do.
Anybody else want to come in with a question at all? Gordon?
Cliona, I just maybe I'd like to ask, how have you found the transition, or have you found any transition or differences between coaching, say, ladies groups like the hockey group and the men's hurling team, the Dublin men's hurling team? Differences and similarities?
I suppose the main difference is, well, it's two different sports, so that's the difference. I guess it's the same thing, Gordon. They're both. So I'm coaching and I'm only starting to get to know this group, but the under 23 hockey team. So we've got under 21s, under 23s, and so this is the group, the group that is just underneath that Olympic team. So they're in a fascinating position because they're trying to push in there. They're not sure, so they're kind of yo-yoing up and down. Some of them will make it. Some of them you might see them in Tokyo. Some of them you might see them in Paris. Some of them they may never make it, and that's just the nature of what they're trying to do. So it's different because they're from all over the country, and you're trying to bring them together when they do get an opportunity together and build that team cohesion and camaraderie there from people from all over Ireland, and some of them are based in the UK, etc. Take the men's hurling team, and they're all from Dublin, so already you're getting more contact. There's when usual training resumes, you're meeting them every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So there's a great continuation or a continuity with your coaching and your hands-on. So you feel like you can make a lot of progress because you're seeing them a lot. With the hockey, you're in and out. So it's a different skill set from a coach's point of view in terms of how you manage that group and build relationships. So put it this way, I'm coaching that group now, and I'm trying to give them stuff to work on for their own individual fitness. The hockey players, some of them I haven't met before. So just because they weren't at the particular training days, they couldn't travel before Christmas or whatever it was. So I'm talking to them on Zoom. I mightn't meet them until, who knows, March, April, whenever the restrictions lift. So that's just, I suppose, a challenge, a logistical challenge of that particular group. But in terms of, I mean, they're both, and this is the point I was making earlier about the ambition. They're both of those groups are highly competitive and highly ambitious, but I maybe coach them in slightly different ways because of the logistical challenges and because I've got to figure out what sparks the fire for them.
We have a question coming in too from James Langford. It's just before we finish up, two last ones maybe. He's saying about coaching mental toughness, positive. Do you do visualization? Do you do black routines? As far as I know, you do. I know with that squash player I was talking about, that was something she said to me. You work very much on the psychology of her game with her.
Yeah, it depends on the context. It depends on the other support staff that are there. So sometimes I'm in a group with the sports psychologist where it's not my role to do that, so I don't go anywhere near it. But the squash player you're referring to, so I started with her S&C, and then it came about her performance. And for her, like, incredibly talented player, but just the performance environment was challenging for a while. So we had to really talk about, okay, well, what is it about the environment? And it came down to, she'd get distracted, she'd be worrying about the score, she's in this little box with another human being and thinking about the referee outside. So for her, we really focused on the kind of how do you maintain your attention on the next important thing. So the next important thing is the serve, and then the next important thing after that is the next shot. And how do you just, what is the next important thing?
Yeah, and I think there is so much sports psychology out there, and sports psychology books and stuff out there too. People can get more advice on it, because it isn't, that's not particularly your area of expertise really. But if it impinges on performance, which is your area, then you look at it, as you say. Look, just before we finish up, I want to thank Cliona O'Connor for just an amazing discussion. Really, it's just been so broad. I think everybody can take something from it. We are privileged to have you, and privileged to hear all of that. If it was in America somewhere, we'd be paying big bucks to get this kind of stuff. So thanks so much, Cliona. Thanks to Gordon and Katrina for organising. Thanks particularly to everybody who listened in tonight and with such great attention. And I suppose I always think about coaching, that notion of one one good adult. You know, they say a lot of good coaches is the one good adult in our lives, you know, and I think if you're listening in tonight, I bet you're already a one good adult. But we hope that whatever you learned tonight will help you to get better at what you do, or seek more expertise in what you do, but also to bring other people along with you, and particularly other women, because we really would love to see more of them in coaching, because we know it changes the environment sometimes, and also it helps the young girls to stay longer. And just to finish up, I'm going to tell you that there's going to be history made at the Super Bowl next Sunday week. So the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are playing the Kansas City Chiefs. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have 2 women in their coaching team, 2 professional coaches. One of them, Laurie Locust, is their assistant defensive line coach. So she's coaching their defensive line. And the other one is an S&C. Maral Javadifar she's an S&C coach as well. That is an indicative, I think, of where women are getting to now in sport. They're getting jobs in professional sport. Men or women, you know, they're starting to break through at men's sport as well, and in sports that are very traditionally male. And really interesting as well for us, and particularly in line with the 2020, because they want more women coaches and officials. This will be the first Super Bowl that has a female referee. So one of the refereeing team, Sarah Thomas, is a full-time NFL referee, and she's the first to do a Super Bowl. So maybe we can think about that and hope that that will inspire us all to keep getting better at what we do. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, Cliona. Thanks a lot. Brilliant. Fascinating. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Cliona.